world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's Monday, the 30th of March, year of our Lord 2026. Well, over the weekend we had massive protests, not just millions here in the United States, but around the world. And if you look at who is funding this protest, it's very concerning where Trump is pushing us. He's pushing us towards the Marxists. And of course, Fox News talks about who's paying for the No Kings rallies. They don't talk about who's paying for them. We'll talk about that. It's a very dangerous game of this false dichotomy, this Hegelian dialectic, and it was on display fully over the weekend. Yeah, there's plenty of protest about Trump. As a matter of fact, we're going to start with the things that he has betrayed us on. Actually, I think we're going to start with his moronic comments over the weekend for some comedy relief. I guess you're always supposed to start a speech with some comedy. So we'll start with Trump's speeches. We'll be right back. Well, every time he speaks, he steps in it big time, doesn't he? And so he was talking to a bunch of, this is the Future Investment Initiative Priority Summit on Friday evening. These are his future owner-donors. You can make a lot of money if you buy me. Yeah, I'll help you with all this stuff. I help you as I violate the Constitution. We'll all get rich on this grift. Well, as he was speaking to them, he just came right out and said the obvious, which is what a lot of people are protesting the next day about the No Kings rally.
But they're doing it for two reasons. Number one is they want to deflect from all of the tremendous success that we're having in this military operation. I won't use the word.
Oh, a lot of success.
The word war, that's maybe not a good.
Look at what's happening in the economy. This is an economic.
The word war, because you're supposed to get approval. So I'll use the word military operation, which is really what it is. It's called a military decimation. But they don't like the good publicity. They don't like to see us succeed. They want to see our country fail.
Yeah, he wants to see the Constitution fail, I think, and our country fail. How are we doing? How's this global depression going, Trump? Is that what you're after this time? Last time you shut everything down, you began your administration trying to shut down all global trade, throwing monkey wrenches into every supply chain you could imagine, foreign and domestic. And now you're pretty far along in terms of creating a global depression. But, you know, I don't like to use the word war because you're supposed to get approval. Yeah, he knows exactly what he's doing, acting like a king. Yeah, we're achieving each and every one of our military objectives, are we? Rubio's doing it again. You know, he's talking about how wonderful and mighty they are, and then immediately saying, we need help. And these people who aren't helping us, they're going to have some problems in the future.
Also, to be a little nitpicky, decimation means, destroying 1/10 of something. Yeah. Decimation does not mean utter annihilation.
That's right. He may have destroyed 1/10 of the Iranian missiles and drones, and they had far more than they ever thought they did because they didn't pay any attention to what they were doing. Anyway, he says, I guess we're 2 weeks ahead of schedule, but he's not sure. At some point, he said in another speech, at some point you got to decide what you're going to do. Yeah, maybe this is the point. Maybe you should decide to get out. But he's not going to do that because that would be humiliating for him. It would be an admission of defeat. As a matter of fact, right now, and of course, our hope is always in God, and we should be praying for this war to end before it metastasizes into something that envelops us all, including Americans. We are not so exceptional that we won't have bombs land on our shore. But in terms of the way things are lining up, there's no chance that Trump is just going to back off and leave, which is what he shouldn't have gone in the first place. And because he's going to pay too high of a price for that. But they're going to double down on some really horrible policies. They're betraying allies right now, people who have bought weapon systems from us, like Switzerland. They have stolen money from them, quite frankly. And not only is everybody seeing the weakness that is here, but they're also seeing the treachery and the perfidy that is here. And so that's one option. He's either going to back down or he's going to double up. Well, it looks like he's going to double up. It seems like the only adults in the room may be coming from Russia and China. They're trying to do moves to keep the economy going as U.S. and Israel pursue their vendettas and greater Israel lusts, the Genghis Khan plan, right? Well, the Russians and the Chinese are looking for a way to help Trump save face so he can get out of there. Because if he doubles down, it only gets worse. As a matter of fact, I put this together and put this up on Twitter. This has become something of a tar baby for him. You want to talk about a quagmire? That's what this is. And, you know, he began just like Brer Rabbit when he comes up to the tar baby. And tar baby doesn't say anything to him, right? Because it's not real. And he feels disrespected. And so he says, I'm going to count to 3. And just like Trump said, I'm going to count to 2 days. Well, now I'm going to count to 5 days. Now I'm going to count to 10 days.
He started counting 1. But the tar baby ain't said nothing. Red Fox lay low and chuckling in his stomach. 2. But still the tar baby don't say nothing. Red Fox, he lay low with the fidgets. 2.5. Shh. 3. Yeah. Turn me loose. I got it.
No! Get me out of this Iran mess! This is a disaster! A total disaster! So sticky! Help! This is rigged!
Poor little critter. He learned a powerful lesson, but he learned it too late. But it just goes to show you what comes of mixing up with something you got no business with in the first place.
Yeah, well, he's got no business with this in the first place either, does he? And he hasn't learned his lesson. As a matter of fact, what he was saying to these people who are wanting to get rich. Well, if you want to get rich, Trump ain't your horse. Okay, unless you got some kind of corruption scheme going on. If you want to just have a market economy and a rising tide where all ships are rising, he's not your guy for that. Yeah, now he can cut you some dishonest deals. Somebody's made a lot of money betting on the markets using the pronouncements that Trump is making. But anyway, he said this in front of them. He said, we're weeks ahead of schedule. We knew it was going to be easy. They knew it was going to be easy. They thought it was going to be easy because they didn't think about the Strait of Hormuz being closed or any of the rest of this stuff. Yeah, you tell this to the Marines and soldiers who are going to be dying on your behalf. You tell them how easy it is. What a disgusting person he is. Just amazing. They actually sent out a letter saying, get your affairs in order, say goodbye to your family and stuff like that. This is how cold these people are. They don't care about the lives of the Iranians that they're dropping bombs on. They don't care even to know if they're going after a military target. They certainly don't care about their own soldiers and sailors. They didn't care when they were forcing them to get injected with a bioweapon. And they didn't care about each and every one of us as they gave tens of billions of dollars to Pfizer to inject us with this bioweapon. And so we know they're murderers. We know they're liars and thieves. And he just proves it. So he said, we knew it was going to be easy. We call it a military operation. We don't call it a war. We call it a military operation. He said, of course, they call it a war. I call it a military conflict. And there's a legal reason for that, but you get into a war, a military operation, a conflict, and then they say that my base is eroding. Maybe it's because you're violating the law, violating the Constitution, violating your promises to your base. I mean, if you've got a base, that is amazing. And it is amazing that he does have a base. But these are people who really don't know what's happening. As a matter of fact, at CPAC, you see the pictures of the rooms that are like 3/4 empty. And then the pictures of people my age who are snoozing off at the tables, bored to death. And the guy gets up and he goes, "How many of you want impeachment?"
How many of you would like to see impeachment hearings?
Yeah, I'd clap for that.
That was the wrong answer. Let me try it again. How many of you would like to see impeachment hearings? No.
Yeah, this is CPAC.
Someone bring some coffee.
Anybody that's at CPAC at this point
I know.
really is clueless, and they don't know what they're cheering for. They really don't.
This is very much either like, the Jeb Bush, please clap, or the Stephen Colbert, Robert Mueller. No, this is bad. We're not supposed to cheer for this.
Yeah, this is the please impeach. That's my plea with them. Let's just do this. Let's go on offense against this offensive tyrant here, Dictator Don. He says, "I don't need any approval. I can do anything I want." He's a king, right? As a war, you're supposed to get approval from Congress, so I call it a military operation because I lie. That's how I do whatever I want. I just ignore the law and I lie about it. And I dare people to try to do something about it. Well, that's where the impeachment comes in. We'll see what happens with all that. Anyway, he does a foreign accent and ran about naming the waterways like the Strait of Trump after himself. And here's what he had to say about that. The Strait of Trump. We got the Gulf of America, and we got the Strait of Trump, and he ties these things together. He's naming everything after himself.
They have to open up the Strait of Trump. Hormuz. Excuse me. I'm so sorry. Such a terrible mistake. The fake news will say he accidentally said, "No, there's no accidents with me, not too many."
Yeah. And he goes on, he backs off. What an amazing act of humility for him to back off and not name it the Strait of Trump, right? And so then he starts talking about the Gulf of Mexico that he named Gulf of America. And he says, America has 92% of the area around it. Well, why don't we call it the Gulf of Mexico? It seems like we dominate. Well, when I checked, it was more than 92%. This, as the Atlantic pointed out a few weeks ago, this is the verbal tell for when Trump is lying about something. He says 92%. He has said that about county electoral results, margins. He's said that about support from farmers. He said that about support from veterans. He said that egg prices dropped by 92%. Whenever he's just throwing a number out there that he made up, he uses the term 92%.
Well, you have to remember about 84.5% of statistics are just made up on the spot.
That's right. Well, I did check it. And of course, he's made this claim before, even about the Gulf of Mexico. And here's the reality of it. You got some different calculations for what the coastline is because, people go in, count bays or inlets where they don't count them or whatever. And so in general, the figures that are agreed is that America has 1,631 miles of coastline in the Gulf of Mexico. Mexico has 2,046 miles. Wikipedia flips it slightly and has some smaller numbers. They say 1,700 miles for America and 1,400 miles for Mexico. So they give a slight edge to Mexico. Other people calculate the other way. They show about 300 miles more for America at Wikipedia. In general, other people have calculated it, show about 400 miles more for Mexico. But the bottom line is, however you calculate it, it's about 48 to 55% Mexico. And for the USA, it's about 45 to 50%. Nowhere near 92% Mexico, because again, that is just his I'm lying to you number. As a matter of fact, as we talk about lying, RFK Jr. had an amazing statement over the weekend. He said, I used to think this guy was a narcissist, but now I know better. Now that I am a sycophant, certified sycophant, I know he's not a narcissist. And he tells a story of what a genius Trump is. He said, we were eating, and he takes this placemat, and he flips it over, and pulls out a Sharpie, and starts drawing a map of the Middle East. and writing down all the countries. I mean, who knew an American who can do geography? This is crazy. He knows the countries and he knows the names of them. Of course, I don't know, since he was doing it in the presence of other Americans, I don't know if any of them knew if he was right or not. And then he writes down the number of troops in each of these states that are there. And he said, that's truly amazing. You know, he can not only draw the map and label the countries, but he knows the troop strength in all these different countries. And it's like, I'm looking at that and I'm like, wait a minute, did anybody check his work? Did anybody grade him? Do we know that those numbers are 92% right or not? Did he just make this stuff up? He does that all the time. He might have made up the map and nobody there would know because they're Americans. We don't know geography till we go to war with people. I'm just now learning all about the Strait of Hormuz and Karg Island and Oman and the tip of the little peninsula that's there. It's like I have no interest in it unless I'm going to travel to there or unless they're going to start sacrificing American military on the shores. Then I get interested. But up to that, we don't really know. So assuming that happened, did anyone check his work? This genius. Again, everything that he tells us is a lie. And I've said this before. If Trump were to say the sky is blue, I'd have to check it. Because I don't trust a thing the guy has to say. And I don't trust RFK Jr. either. I mean, while he's out there doing this, what's going on with the bioweapon? What's going on with fluoride? What's going on with glyphosate? Are you kidding me? You traitors. You're traitors to your promises, traitors to your supporters, traitors to the Constitution, and liars about everything and to everyone about everything. And so, as I said before, he is now betraying his allies who have trusted the U.S. for weapons systems. Think about this. We've lost the trust under Biden when he started doing sanctions with the Iran war, with the Ukraine war. We lost the trust of the international banking system when we started weaponizing it. So it did severe damage to the SWIFT system, to the petrodollar, and the rest of the stuff. They abused that superpower as, I forget what the Frenchman was. There's one Frenchman who said it was an extraordinary privilege, having the petrodollar. And truly it has been extraordinary. And it's going to be a real hardship for Americans when that is taken away. One of the key things that people anticipate when the petrodollar disappears is going to be a drying up of credit. And the federal government is going to be desperate to borrow money. And people don't want to buy the bonds from this morally and financially bankrupt government. That gets to be a real big issue for everybody. It becomes a liquidity issue. And you go back and you look at the Depression, one of the reasons that you had Frank Nicely in Tennessee and many others were trying to get Tennessee to have, as the state, to start to buy and stockpile gold is to maintain liquidity. Because when you look at North Dakota, where they had a state bank, those types of things allowed them to keep liquidity, allowed them to pay employees and keep fuel in the machine, if you will. If you don't have that, everything comes to a grinding stop. And so that's what we're going to see when they destroy the petrodollar. Now, Trump has done everything he can to accelerate what Biden did, just like Biden took over from Trump on the warp speed vaccine. Trump has taken over from Biden on killing the petrodollar. And so one of the issues is the fact that we have a system and we can use it to debank entire countries like Russia if we don't like what they're doing. And okay, so all this stuff that Putin did, I agree he shouldn't have invaded. It was an act of aggression and it was unjust for him to invade. But they had a lot more interest in what was happening there. As a matter, you can make the argument, and many people have made the argument, that he was trying to protect the Russian-speaking, Russian culturally connected people who were living in eastern Ukraine, as Kiev and the new American government had been shelling civilians for, at that point, 8 years. And And it was on their doorstep as well. We don't have any business in Iran. Israel is the one that wants this war, and they're manipulating this for our purpose, but we don't have any threats from Iran directly. Now we do. Now we're getting them mad. Now we're painting a big target on the American people. That's what Trump and AIPAC are doing. But we had no business in that war. And so when you look at where this goes, it's nothing good for America. American prestige is harmed when Trump loses or runs away. These are the two outcomes that are possible. And then it gets even worse because we lose the petrodollar, we lose the Gulf states. The petrodollar and the Gulf states were the basis of the petrodollar. Keeping peace and trade and all that. Trump, everything he's done has been to stop trade, to stop commerce, to throw monkey wrenches into supply chains, everything that he's done in 2020, and they continued with that as soon as he got back in 2025. And so he wants to stop trade, stop peace, no longer going to be Pax Americana and the Gulf states. And then when you pull back, having suffered a loss or stalemate and then pull back, what does that say about our weapons systems? You know, as retired Colonel McGregor said, he said, this is not really asymmetric war, really. He said, they're fighting with state-of-the-art stuff. We're fighting with the same mindset and equipment that we used in World War II, just updated and more expensive, right? We got new versions of the same type of equipment we used in World War II, but it's the same old strategy, the same kinds of power projection. They're using drones and things like that. There is a huge asymmetric economic aspect to this. But people are going to look at this and say, well, I don't know that I need your expensive planes and aircraft carriers because they don't win wars. And not only that, but I can't trust you. Take a look at this. This is the U.S. just stole over $126 million from Switzerland's fighter jet account to cover missile shortfalls in the Iran war. You know, we're pirates. We murder people on the high seas. We execute people who have been shipwrecked. We execute people on the mere suspicion of doing drugs. Even if they had been guilty and found guilty in a court of law, the penalty would not be execution. But this is where we are right now. What does it say about integrity and trust? And do you want to spend massive fortunes of money on buying weapon systems from a country that you can't trust? Well, Switzerland did not approve this. Switzerland did not consent. Switzerland had already frozen its Patriot payments after learning deliveries would be delayed 4 to 5 years. The U.S. circumvented that freeze, and this is coming from an account which is Shanaka Pereira. Switzerland's national broadcaster reported on March the 26th that Washington redirected Swiss funds originally allocated for 36 F-35 fighter jets in order to cover Patriot air defense shortfalls using the Foreign Military Sales Pooled Trust Fund, a structure that allows the Pentagon to reallocate payments across a buyer's contracts without the buyer's permission. You see how these people operate? Oh, well, you think you own that stock, but actually put it in the brokerage house's name, and it's held by some other people on Wall Street. You're way down the list of creditors. So if things get really bad and the market crashes, you have some entitlement to ownership, but you're just one of many creditors and you're way down the list of creditors. We snuck that in at the UCC level. This is the kind of underhanded stuff that has now become characteristic of the systems here in America, the institutions. So the Military Sales Pool Trusted Fund is a structure that allows the Pentagon to reallocate payments across a buyer's contracts without that buyer's permission. Swiss armaments chief confirmed the diverted amount is, quote, low 3-digit millions of Swiss francs, and called the situation very unsatisfactory. The money Switzerland paid for jets is now subsidizing a war that Switzerland refused to participate in. Bern halted new arms exports to the U.S. on March 20th, citing the Iran conflict. Switzerland rejected 2 U.S. military flyover requests linked to the Iran operations. 200 years of armed neutrality, and Washington reached into the account anyway. So here's why. He says the U.S. fired 943 Patriot interceptors defending Gulf states in the first 4 days of Operation Epstein Fury, per a U.S. congressional study cited by the Jerusalem Post last week. Lockheed Martin and Boeing produce 620 Patriot interceptions per year combined. So what that means is that in 4 days, America burned through 18 months of global Patriot production. The war has also consumed roughly 1/3 of the entire THAAD missile stockpile. Annual THAAD production does not exceed 100 units. And while we're talking about it, let's talk about the Tomahawk cruise missiles. As I said last week, annual production, and these things cost $2 to $4 million a piece. Annual production of the Tomahawk missiles is only about 57. And the reports that I've seen go anywhere from 850 to 950 of these things used in just the first couple of days. So they burned through not 18 months, but 15 to 17 years of production at the beginning of this war. What about when we need to defend America? Because they keep poking people and bullying people. They keep poking the Russian bear and the Chinese, trying to start a war here and there. And of course, they're poking Iran big time. What do we do to defend ourselves when Trump and the Pentagon and the military-industrial complex provoke somebody to attacking us? So far, we've been the ones to start all the wars, so I guess we figure we're safe. There won't be a war unless we start it, right? Maybe that's true. Or maybe some of these people are going to get tired of being pushed around, tired of having bombs dropped on their people when they haven't attacked us. Maybe they will attack us. This is why I say this is not national security. This is continuity of government. This does not make the nation more secure to have these wars, especially when we lose the wars, which we have lost all of these undeclared, unjust wars. So they're consuming their own armaments at an amazing pace here. Now, the cost asymmetry is what makes the depletion irreversible at current production rates. This is where the asymmetry is here. Each PAC-3 interceptor costs $3.9 million. Each Iranian Shahed drone costs between $20,000 and $50,000. The cost exchange ratio is 114 to 1 in Iran's favor. So when we have this thing, when we try to intercept their stuff and understand that if it's a missile, we got to use a couple of our anti-missile, anywhere from 2 to 3 of our anti-missile missiles to stop an incoming missile. So it's even worse than that. But when you look at the cost amount, for our missiles, we're paying 114 times more than Iran is. And folks, that shows up in other aspects as well. It's not just that we're bankrupting America, as Eric Peters calls it, his war tax update. When he talks about the war and gives an update on it, he calls it the war tax update for such and such a date. Because that's what it is. The military-industrial complex and people like Trump and all, the Democrats as well, are bankrupting this country. But when it comes to the actual fighting of the war, that 114-time cost advantage is indicative of the complexity of producing these things. And it's one of the reasons why we have such low production figures, why they only can produce like 50 to 100 of these things a year. And there's other aspects involved in it as well. They use very esoteric materials, whether it's rare earth or other things like that. And if you don't have that kind of supply chain for these incredibly complex weapon systems, then you just don't have them at all, regardless of how much money you've got. And again, that petrodollar and the magic credit card that we've been using since the end of World War II is starting to look like it's going to fade away. So that's the real issue. If you're going to have these complicated systems, and didn't we learn that from the Nazis? We look at Germany. They had these very complicated systems. They had we had the Sherman tanks. They had the Panzer tanks, which were far superior to the Sherman tanks, except we could produce way more of the Sherman tanks. And so we kind of operated in a relatively like a swarm, right? And if you got a lot of these things, that's even more important. But we didn't learn that lesson. And we didn't learn the lesson, the fact that they were more advanced. They had fighter jets before anybody else had jets. But we could produce more of the other planes, but we didn't learn that lesson either. So we have gone the direction of the Nazis, not just morally and legally. We've made the same blunders in terms of centralized, complex weapon systems rather than things that are easily manufactured and very cheaply manufactured. Every interceptor fired in the Gulf is one that cannot be delivered to Switzerland or to Ukraine or to Taiwan or Japan or Poland. The State Department warned allies on March 27th that Patriot deliveries to Ukraine would face disruptions as the Pentagon prioritizes Iran per the Quiver quantitative program. So there you go. We're going to prioritize Israel, actually. Lockheed signed a framework to quadruple production to 2,000 units per year. That capacity, however, will not arrive for 6 to 7 years. The Pentagon has asked Congress to shift $1.5 billion from other programs to accelerate procurement. None of this helps now. The interceptors are depleting now. The Allied accounts are being raided now. Switzerland is considering reducing its F-35 order from 36 to 30 jets and accelerating evaluation of European alternatives per Blue Wind and Global Defense Corporation. Swiss parliamentarians have called this redirection of their money, this theft. You call it whatever you want, redirection. We have misappropriated your funds. Whatever. It's just theft, folks. They called it an unacceptable violation of procurement sovereignty. Well, it is. Switzerland is the canary. A neutral country with 2 centuries of armed neutrality just had its fighter jet money stolen without consent to feed a 4-week-old war that is burning 18 months of interceptor production every 96 hours. Every U.S. ally with a pending defense contract should be asking the question about whose account will be next. And again, we're going to lose a petrodollar. We'll show everybody that we're unable to keep peace, unable to protect our allies, that we cut and run and betray them. Show that we're unable to defeat Iran. And show that we will stab our own allies in the back in terms of stealing money, even when they're buying weapons from us. Who would want to buy weapons from a country like this? So, again, when we look at Trump, he goes to Saudi Arabia, and he has a speech there, just as he was saying to the people in Florida, well, I'm not going to call it a war because if I've called it a war, I'd have to get permission. I don't have the authority to do war. So I'll call it something else, right? That's what Truman did. He called it a police action. Well, he goes to speak to, he's speaking to or about the clown prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. And he has this to say.
He didn't think this was going to happen. He didn't think he'd be kissing my ass. He really didn't. He thought he'd be just another American president that was a loser with a country.
You are a loser.
Downhill. But now he has to be nice to me. You tell him he better be nice to me. He's got to be. But it was really something
Yeah, he better be nice to me. Just a mafia don. Pathetic Bulgarian. This is how the President of the United States describes America's most important Gulf ally. Because remember, Saudi Arabia cut oil production by 6.7 million barrels. Their energy infrastructure has been threatened by Iran for destruction. The U.S. needs to keep oil markets stable. And it would be nice if we had the petrodollar, but of course that has already been burned. And Trump is asking them to join the Iran war. And so he talks about this guy kissing his butt. I said, you better be nice to me. I guess, think about this, what his meetings are like. We've seen some clips public clips where he's got Stephen Miller going on this long, thing, kneeling before him symbolically and praising him up one side and down the other. And then he turns to another one and goes, "Can you do better than that?" And he does do his best to do that, right? So imagine what the meetings are like when you go in there. Imagine if he says that publicly about a guy whose help he really needs. Imagine what he says to people like Mike Johnson or Marco Rubio. I'd like to be a fly on the wall to see how these guys are just kowtowed before him. It's a foul-mouthed fool is what he is. It's all about ego politics. He doesn't understand that he needs the Saudi help. No. He doesn't do geopolitics. He only does ego politics because he's not, and this is where the left gets it wrong, he's not so much a king as he is a mafia don. So while he's asking him for military cooperation, the isolation of America, says Brian Allen, is not just a policy failure. It is a daily practice from this foul-mouthed fool that we have as Trump. Just amazing. And then he goes on, this is the same meeting that he had on Friday night. He goes on to say, well, I'm going to take some questions. I've been told I need to take some questions. So listen to what he tells them they can ask him.
Thank everybody very much. And I'm asked to take a few questions. And unlike other politicians, they would like the questions screened. I don't ask for screening of the questions. You can ask me anything you want. You can talk sex. You can do whatever the hell you want.
Because that's all he thinks about, right?
I'm here for you.
Yeah, he screens the documents. That's what he screens. When people talk about the kind of sex that he had, he screens the documents. He doesn't let that go out. It's interesting. Some of the stuff has been hacked by Iran, people who don't like Trump, and they're putting the documents out now. It's going to come out one way or the other. But yeah, you can talk about sex. Can you imagine any other president saying that?
I can think of almost nothing that I would want to talk about less than Donald Trump's sex life.
Well, yeah, it's like you want to take advice from him on that. I mean, it's pretty crazy. And so then one person.
See, the first thing you do is you buy an island. You get an island, a really nice big one, but a weird temple on it.
Yeah, it's disgusting. Anyway, somebody asked him about money. And so where does he go? AI. Yeah, that's where he's going to make a lot of money, right? That's the first thing he did as the second term. Let's bring in, I made a lot of money with mRNA stuff, and I can make a lot of money with these AI guys. So let's combine these two things, and we'll have custom-made poison for you, custom-made genetic injections, right? Genetic code injections. He says, well, look, the one that they're going crazy about, he says, is AI. Now, my whole family, Eric is doing a good job. All of us, Ivanka, we like real estate. Yeah, they like Gaza. They like greater Israel taking over all these different places in the Middle East. He says, so I think probably if you're going to say one thing, AI, and just hope that it works. Hope that it works because we're going to transfer all of our military control over to AI. How's that going to work out for us? Because it is... one of the things about AI, it is as sycophantic as Trump's cabinet. It will tell you what you want to hear. Anyway, he says, so I think probably if you're going to say one thing, I'd say AI and just hope that it works. And as the person who wrote this article for Mediaite said, mercifully, nobody asked him about sex. Didn't ask about his pedophile preferences or Jeffrey Epstein or any of the rest of this stuff either.
So that sort of Damocles is still hanging in the air.
Again, why would he say that, right? He gets so upset with anybody talking about the Epstein stuff. He can't help himself. He just brings it back because that's always forefront of mind that's there. And so Brian Allen points out, he says, so here we are, day 27 of the Iran war. Israel just struck Iranian nuclear facilities. Iran is demanding sovereignty over the strait as a peace condition. The Philippines has only 40 days of oil left. April the 6th power plant strike deadline is approaching. Thousands are dead across the region. And Trump says, well, you want to talk about sex? That's it. That's it. That's the guy that's supposedly president here. So you can talk about sex. I'm here for you, he said. Not that there is a shred of honor left in him, says Annie Dufour. But each time he talks, he buries the presidency of the United States deeper in the sewerage. Every little boy and girl in the USA growing up since 2016 has been exposed to the foulness of Trump. They take their cues from above. A generation has been ruined. Well, again, the appropriate way to handle him is as an example of what you don't want to be in life, right? There's no honor in being the president of the United States anymore. Why lie to our kids about that? The fact that he is president doesn't mean that he is the pinnacle of achievement. You know, we've always heard that line. Well, in America, anybody can grow up to be president. Well, we've seen that over and over again. And it is anybody can be appointed president if they will serve the appropriate people here. Franklin Graham, meanwhile, says that Donald Trump has been raised up by God, and he urges loyalty in the midterms. Now, what does that say? This is a guy who is going to elevate him. The Franklin Grahams and the Paul Whites are going to raise him up as a role model. And because there's always going to be wolves that are grifting the sheep. Where you find sheep, you're going to find wolves. It's what they do.
The thing is, Trump may have been put in place by God, but if he was, it's because we deserve a punishment as a nation.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, as a matter of fact, when you stop and think, God is sovereign in the affairs of man. And, but he has delegated some of this stuff to Satan. That's what the Bible tells us. And, as part of the temptation of Christ, what was the last one that he did? Well, he had Satan promise to give him all the kingdoms of the world. Just bow down and serve me. And I think that would not be a temptation if it were not true. And I think we saw that happen, didn't we, in 2020? How did these people all do the same thing at the same time? It is a vast conspiracy, and it's bigger than humans. Remember, we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, and that's true even when we're talking about politics. We're really wrestling against the power that is behind these people. These people have been put in many cases, as a curse against us. God has allowed Satan to put in the people who will serve him. And we saw that in spades in 2020. You look at Trump, look at Netanyahu. Netanyahu using his own people, offering them up as guinea pigs to Pfizer. I mean, it's like putting them on an altar. Just disgusting. And of course, Trump was the one who created all of this stuff with our tax money, just like he's creating this war with our tax money. He kills and robs us to kill. And so back to Franklin Graham. This is Roman Shameta says, it sickens me when quote unquote Christians claim that Trump has been raised up by God because Trump is the antithesis of Jesus' teachings. Instead of love, he portrays hatred. Instead of forgiveness, vengeance. Instead of meekness, narcissistic egotism. And the list goes on. But I'm no longer surprised by Franklin Graham. He praised Putin repeatedly and urged people to pray for Putin's wisdom. But not once has he called for Putin's repentance, right? And I don't see anybody when they say pray for Trump, they never talk about praying for his repentance. They never talk about praying for his conversion either. As a matter of fact, you got this demagogue in Texas, who's running for Senate in Texas, this Tallarico guy, which the left dearly loves. People like Stephen Colbert, went to bat for him, fought CBS in order to have an interview with him. They think they've got it solved now. They got a guy who is going to seminary, but he doesn't know the first thing about, well, I think he does know. But, the demagoguery that is coming around him when some people said on a podcast, we'll get to that later, he needs to be crucified with Christ. Now, if you grow up in a church, as Tallarico said that he did, And if you're going to a seminary, there's no way that you can escape hearing that language. And you understand that's metaphorical, right? Especially here we are at Easter time. And so he knows fully well what that's about. I can excuse the ignorance on the part of the New York Times and the Austin Statesman. They have never heard this language before. But he certainly knows what it is. And for him to demagogue about that and say, well, they may want to kill me, but I still love them. Yeah, that's disgusting. And so you see this happening from Franklin Graham, Paula White, all these people. The greatest single cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge Jesus with their lips, walk out the door, and deny him by their lifestyle. That is what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable, says Brennan Manning. That's a quote this person put in their post. And I would say Hegseth is exhibit A of that as well. I would just say, though, folks, that when you look at these wolves among the sheep, when you look at people like Franklin Graham and Pete Hegseth and Tallarico, they are not Christ. You know, the pastor or the priest who rapes children is not Christ. These people are hypocrites. They're wolves. They're users. Don't let that scheme of the devil keep you away from Christ, right? Make sure that you have your worship focused on the right thing. Don't focus your worship on some institution, some group of churches, some individual, some celebrity, some church leader. None of that. And don't focus it on a foreign country either, and the government of that foreign country. Keep your worship focused on Christ. That is the key thing. And again, Franklin Graham says he misspoke when he called for CPAC to help Trump get reelected in 2028. He said, I wasn't calling for him to run for a third term. He just loves him. He loves him so much. He says, I was endorsing Trump's positions on issues for the third term. And so he says, that's what we have to vote for, is Trump's positions on issues. And I'd like to say, specifically what? What positions? And again, you know, a politician has got positions because positions change, principles don't. But anyway, what positions does he have on any issues that he hasn't betrayed both the Constitution and his campaign promises? I'd like to know. He's nothing but a demagogue, a thief, a liar, and a mass murderer. But this is what Franklin Graham says for him. He says he stands not only for religious freedom, I would say he does not stand for religious freedom. If you look at what happened with his Religious Freedom Commission, they kicked Carrie Prejean Baller off because she said, well, wait a minute, I'm not allowed to disagree with a country, the state of Israel. You say that that is anti-Semitism? I can disagree with their religion, because certainly they disagree with our religion. They say that Christ is burning in hell. And I disagree with that. I find that offensive. They're free to say that, but I'm not free to say similar things about their religion. So he says, Trump is not ashamed of the name of Jesus Christ. I imagine he has used it frequently in the same way that Penn and Teller use it, as a swear word, to blaspheme. I've never heard him publicly talk about Jesus Christ. Maybe he has. Mostly he just wants to talk about sex, whether it's public or private. So again, he is not ashamed of the name of Jesus Christ. He is not ashamed. Yeah, he's not ashamed about the things that he should be ashamed of. And all of his talk about religious liberty is just that, talk. Franklin Graham should be standing up for religious liberty. He should be holding Trump's feet to the fire. Instead, he gives him a pass, as all these people do. Every time he violates the Constitution or law, whenever he violates God's law, they give him a pass. He said earlier in remarks, after he made his statement, he came back and made some corrections to it after speaking at CPAC. He said, earlier in my remarks, I made the point that President Trump is not on the ballot, but his policies are. As I closed, I meant to say that we need to reelect President Trump's policies, but I misspoke, and I appreciate the opportunity to clarify any confusion. We just got to understand that there's a lot of differences between politicians' promises and the reality. And he hasn't come to terms with that yet. As a matter of fact, while we're talking about, Trump wanting to talk about sex in the midst of this worldwide chaos that he's created, it just amazes me, doesn't it amaze you? That one guy can create this much death, destruction, and chaos. He's got the button on his desk. That's the power that the American president has. And that's why he's been chosen by Satan for that office. If you call the White House using a Google phone last week, it showed up on your phone calling Epstein Island. At first I looked at this and I thought, yeah, the people in the White House know who they're working for, don't they? But it turns out it was somebody that works for Google. And they went in and changed that. Of course, that has been taken away from them, they said. But, when we look at Google, YouTube is still pulling down the accounts of people who warn about the effects of the vaccine. We just had a study come out saying that all the children who died, every single child who died suddenly from myocarditis was vaccinated. No children have died from myocarditis that were not vaccinated. People who put up that study had it taken down by YouTube. Let me say this. YouTube is an accessory to murder. They're murderers themselves. They're guilty of it. They're censorship, killing people, just as they do when they cheer for war or these other issues. They have become accessories. They will kill people for money, just like the big hospital corporations, just like Trump himself. And so, and some people from the Washington Post style section wanted to call the White House to find out what Melania Trump is going to be wearing on Wednesday when she made her appearance with the robot. Here's the picture of this. Come out. She's walking out with a figure robot. It's not a Tesla robot. It's a figure robot. And I'm not going to play the whole thing. It goes on for quite a while. But the joke that came, of course, when that robot speaks, it's got this typical California Creek speak. It's got a female voice and does the Creek speak and the up speak and all the rest of the stuff that just drives me up a wall. It's like, no, now they're going to put it in robots all over the place. They're all going to sound like, I guess it's the Kardashians who started that.
Even our robots are gay and stupid.
I heard a report on the radio once. They were talking about where that came from, and they thought it came from the Kardashians. That's the first time I ever heard the Kardashians speak. You can't get on the internet without seeing their faces everywhere and other parts of their anatomy, I guess. But to hear them speak, it was like unbelievable. They sound so incredibly, all this upspeak and the Creek speak and all the rest of the stuff. So anyway, but before you get to that, it was actually Shannon Joy put up the video and said, let's see how'd it go. Said a robot, a tranny, and a prostitute walk into a bar, because she was there with Macron's wife, right? And so the three of them were sitting there, and there was a whole bunch of jokes that people put in, which I won't repeat on air, but yeah, it sounds like the beginning of a joke. A robot, a tranny, and a prostitute walk into a bar. And that's so they wanted to find out what the prostitute was wearing.
I have to say, I find it funny that occasionally someone comes out and just accuses some politician's wife of being a tranny. It just sticks because we know these people are so gross and depraved that it's a real possibility. I don't personally believe Macron's wife is a tranny, but I wouldn't be surprised by it, Well,
here's the thing, Travis. They talk about that, and of course, that's Candace Owen has been sued by that because she wanted to major on that. And yet the reality is that we know that Macron's wife is a pedophile. I mean, she came after Macron when he was underage. That's an established fact. So in terms of the tranny stuff, to me, that's downstream from all the rest of the stuff. She's a known pedophile. It's consistent with these evil people who are handed the reins of government by Satan. Literally, I mean that literally. While the number for the White House switchboard was absolutely correct, and they took screenshots of it showing the number and then showing the label at the top. The label that appeared on some phones was not. Instead, it referenced Well, maybe it was correct, right? It referenced the nickname for Epstein's Island and called it Epstein Island. So when you call it, you show the number and it'd say Epstein Island above it. I think that's a pretty accurate description, actually. But it only affected Android phones, so it was based with Google. Meanwhile, we look at the Rothschild Bank. It's been raided as part of the Epstein investigation. Isn't it interesting that, and this is New American Story, isn't it interesting that across Europe, there are investigations and people are going to jail for things that have turned up in the Epstein documents? We don't seem to see anything wrong here in America because we got people like Kash Patel and Pam Bondi who are criminals themselves. Just like I said about Google covering up for the vaccine and for the fake pandemic, you got these people have absolutely no shame as they cover up for Trump and hide the information that's there, but other people have seen it. And around the world, you have investigations happening. This is the Rothschild Bank. As they point out, the New American, this week in France, the Paris arm of the Rothschild Bank was raided by authorities. An Epstein-linked probe, Ariane de Rothschild, who employed Jeffrey Epstein, was present during the search, according to a source accounted by Reuters. The Central Office for Combating Corruption and Tax and Financial Offenses conducted the raid in an investigation targeting Fabrice Aidan, a former employee of the Rothschild banking dynasty from 2014 to 2016, for alleged corruption. So this is a guy who worked for them for 2 years. You know, Wilbur Ross, who Trump put in as his commerce secretary before this Lucky Lukenik criminal mastermind, Wilbur Ross worked for the Rothschilds for 24 years, from 1976 to 2000. And then he left to start his own company. And famously, Wilbur Ross said, because the Rothschilds evidently had some exposure or had bought into Trump's bankrupt casinos, he pulled up and he said, I pulled up and there was this massive crowd and he's talking to everybody. And he said, and they were fascinated with everything that he had to say. And he said he called the Rothschild Bank and he said, this is a guy I think we can work with. And so how did they work with him? And when you stop and think about this, he was there from 1976 to 2000, Wilbur Ross was. So he was with the Rothschilds while Jeffrey Epstein was doing his stuff at the height of his stuff. And as he's telling people, as we see in some of the emails, he's telling them, as you know, I'm an agent of the Rothschilds. And so Epstein is with the Rothschilds. Wilbur Ross, Trump's first commerce secretary, is with the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds are working with Trump. All of it keeps coming back to Trump and his inner circle. It is really very much like a Charles Dickens novel where everybody is interconnected and related to everybody else. And so we see that yet again with the Rothschilds. So everything about the probe is vague, leaving analysts wondering if the Rothschilds are also being quietly investigated for criminal activity. It is the sacred cow of the deep state, the Rothschild Bank. As the New American says, the magnitude of any Rothschild affiliate facing accountability is significant, considering the power behind the outfit. The Rothschilds are the pinnacle of deep state financing, says the New American. Family's origins trace back to the 15th century Frankfurt, Germany, with a business beginning in 1769. The Rothschilds boast that they are, quote, unconstrained by short-term thinking and take a long-term view, unquote. In their global advisory and business activities, they have even determined the outcome of wars. Of course they have. They point out there's a book, The World's Banker, The History of the House of the Rothschilds. Well, of course, they're at the center of all this. It's a famous part of how they got their fortune. But all wars are bankers' wars. They really are. Rich man's war, poor man's fight. Gary Allen, the author of None Dare Call It Conspiracy, noted that during our American Civil War, the North was financed by the Rothschilds through their American agent, August Belmont, and the American South was financed by the Rothschilds through the Erlangers, the relatives of the Rothschilds. So they were funding both sides of the Civil War. the Rothschilds. They love war. Both world wars are also heavily influenced by the Rothschild web of banking. Epstein was employed by the Rothschilds, worked closely with Ariane de Rothschild, the CEO. Department of Justice files reveal a contract between Epstein's company and the Rothschilds, with Epstein receiving a payout of tens of millions of dollars for, quote, the work, unquote. Nothing more specific. He even openly bragged about the collaboration. In a 2016 email to Palantir founder Peter Thiel, Epstein opened with, as you probably know, I represent the Rothschilds. And so does Wilbur Ross. And Trump was their puppet. Europe's handling of Epstein's colleagues is far superior to that of the United States, where law enforcement has made virtually no attempts to hold the elites accountable. As a matter of fact, what the Department of Justice did was they redacted the names of the perps, and they exposed the names of the victims. And so we can thank Trump's regime of corruption and depravity for all of that. Meanwhile, the House Republicans see where this is all headed, and they've got record numbers of them saying they're not going to run for re-election. This is a harbinger of what they expect to see happening, quite frankly. Just as we saw with Nancy Pelosi, when she could see the Republicans were lined up to capture the House, she said, well, I'm not going to run again. And then when it looked like the tide was switching again, she came back. Right now, you got the Republican rats are jumping ship, and it's a harbinger of how they're going to flip this thing. And they're going to flip it to the Marxists. We'll talk about what happened with the No Kings stuff yesterday, but we're going to get somebody like Newsom in California or worse. And that's what Trump is making possible here. An unprecedented number of House Republicans are opting to retire or to pursue other offices. So far, 36 House Republicans, and that total exceeds the record set in Trump's first term midterm in 2018, when 34 House Republicans chose not to run for re-election, and the Democrats regained control of the lower chamber under Trump's first term. And then he spends the next 2 years fighting investigations and impeachment. That'd be one way to check him. Checks and balances. Anyway, the number is only likely to grow in the weeks ahead as Republicans reassess their roles in Washington amid the Trump 2.0 era, and the expectations that the president's party historically faces losses in a midterm year. But this is going to be especially big considering the things that he has done, how unpopular he is, the illegal war, the Epstein cover-ups, all the rest of this stuff. It's hard. You got to be a really master technician, said one Republican who's getting out, Don Bacon. You got to be a master technician to run against the left and at the same time disagree with the president on a lot of things. And I've done it. I've done it since 2020. And I don't know. To me, I just knew it was time for a change. I imagine he's really tired of walking that tightrope. And quite frankly, I don't really care. You know, I'm not trying to please Republicans. I'm not trying to please MAGA audience. Every time I get on Twitter and start making comments, I just see the numbers on my account just dropping. You know, people unfollow. They don't want to hear it. The people who need to hear it the most don't want to hear it. I don't care. I mean, that's it. You know, it's just, it's like the gospel. You know, our call is to make the proclamation. I can't help it if people believe it or not, if they want to stop their ears. It's just, you know, what we have to do is tell people what's happening for their own good as well as our own good as well. Of the 36 House Republicans, 10 are also running for governor. As one person said, I can accomplish far more on a national level, even being a governor. And that's absolutely true. And that's where you get the most leverage. And that's where our attention should be focused. It should be focused on what is happening locally. And on Friday, I had the interview with the New American editor-in-chief. And I think that's an important function. It's the sort of thing where I could cover local politics here in Tennessee or whatever, but I can't cover local politics everywhere. That's why you need to have an organization that is going to rate these people at the state and local level and help you to get a handle on what is happening in your area, because that's where you can have the most opportunity to have change. And if you get the right people in, we have the tools in the Constitution to stop what the federal government is doing. It's just nobody wants to use those tools if they even know about it. We are not using jury nullification. We're not using state nullification. These are tools that are waiting to be used, and they are legal, and they are the alternative to having a revolution, a civil war, which is what the right and left want now. And you can see that in both what Trump is doing and the reactions to what he is doing. We'll be right back.
You're listening to The David Knight Show.
APS Radio delivers multiple channels of music right to your mobile device. Get the APS Radio app today and listen wherever you go.
Well, welcome back, folks. We've got some comments here. I'm Marty says Crazy Donald is wearing his Hormuz straitjacket.
Yeah, he's in dire straits, isn't he? They should put him in a straitjacket. That's a great comment, Marty. I like that.
So cozy. Feels like a hug. Stealth Patriot.
Yeah, he can hug himself. I'm sure that's what he wants to do. He'd probably be very happy in a straitjacket because he's constantly hugging himself.
And give yourself a pat on the back. Stealth Patriot, thank you so much for the tip. We really do appreciate it.
Yes.
Says, with Iran threatening to cut the major communication cable running across the strait, does anyone else feel that we are being had? Are we all going to have to rely on Elon's Starlink satellites?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of Machiavellian machinations that are happening in and around this stuff. I mean, what Israel is doing in terms of the number of wars that they have started, even to the extent they're saying, well, you know, if we don't draft the ultra-Orthodox Jews who don't want to be drafted, the IDF is going to collapse on itself. We just don't have enough people to fight all these different wars. You know, bring in the Americans. Maybe we can get them to attack Lebanon too. But yeah, they want to have a greater Israel, and of course, the Trump administration would love to have a monopoly on oil. They don't care if they burn down the entire world to do it. It's a lot of different things like that are happening. But thank you very much for the tip. And I was just looking at this. I thought that I had uploaded to my tablet here the contributors to Zelle and to Cash App. I wanted to read off their names. Just to give you a heads up, here we are. Tomorrow is the last day of the month, and we are still just below. They've got the gas gauge at 75%, but we're a little bit below that. We're closer to that than we are the other number, but we put it at 75%, but we're not quite there yet. So we really would appreciate your help. If you listen to the program, that's what makes we don't require that you pay. We just ask people if they'd like to support the program. We make it voluntary, and we don't put this behind a paywall. But we really would appreciate it if you're able and willing to make a contribution as we're getting towards the end of the month.
And we have Wally Walrus. They thought of all these things, David, they just didn't care.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it didn't come as a surprise. Trump was told over and over again about the Strait of Hormuz, and everybody knew that. It wasn't any surprise. I mean, anybody that looks at this says, well, you know what's going to happen if you go after Iran? You know, just first of all, look at the Strait of Hormuz. The next thing you need to do is look at the geography. As people are pointing out, and it was Colonel McGregor who was talking about the blunder of Winston Churchill, the famous blunder of the Dardanelles, trying to take that. And, you know, they land on this. It was a bloody disaster for the British because they land on this small strip of land, and there is a steep mountain range. So, you know, these people at the top of the mountain range are just shooting down on the people on the beach all the time. And he goes, same situation with Iran. If you look at where they're going to land there, he says, except it's worse. You know, instead of it being like this, you know, like maybe a 60-degree angle, it's almost 90 degrees shooting straight down on them. And it's just suicidal. They haven't looked at the topography, haven't looked at the geography. And they did look at it and just said, I don't care. You know, Trump really doesn't care. He doesn't really care whether or not his economic program works either. And he's got this idiot Peter Navarro coming up with these things. What was it? Reciprocal tariffs or something? This nonsense that he made up, and he didn't even calculate it correctly. So,
we just got a tip from Wally Walrus. Says, thank you, David and family, for all you do.
Well, thank
you, Wally Walrus. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
We have Audi MRR, and of course you can find Audi on his own program at Everything Is a Lie, damn it, it's on Rumble. You can check it out. Go do that. He's had on Angry Tiger, and I believe Jason Barker as well.
Yeah, he just did. So you can go back and see the archives. You can see that.
I would like to watch it, but sadly, I barely have time to do anything.
Yeah, we do the programming for hours. You're uploading stuff everywhere afterwards.
Cutting, uploading, trying to make more graphics and things. There's never enough time in the day, is there? But Audi MRR says it's almost as if Trump is a Trojan horse and is ensuring the fall of the global economy in order to usher in something like, I don't know, CBDC, perhaps.
That's the way I see it. Except he'll call it stablecoin because he and his buddies will have their own private version of CBDC so they can make the money instead of the central banks. Yeah.
We also have Big Brit is back again. Some shortages here with petrol stations running out. It's already starting.
Yeah, that's the big issue. You know, when we look at what is happening in Australia, this is and it reminds me so much of the 1970s. It's like I said, I just hope they don't bring back disco music. That would just be intolerable. You know, the gas shortages, the hyperinflation, all the rest of this stuff. But please don't bring back that music. And you know, we go back and look at the 70s. That's what Tower Power was singing about. Yeah, the most powerful energy crisis in human history is looming. Russian oil exports are halting after Ukraine attacks. And I was going to let that run. We just had that great solo that Lenny White had in there.
Oh, sorry.
We're going to do like a news break with the music going there, and Travis cut me off. Doggone. Yeah, that's Tower Power. And it was a stupid lyrics, but that group just keeps getting better over the years as far as I listen to them. But I used to know the name of every single guy in that band. I mean, we really studied them.
Sorry, I was thinking, that's about time for, what we can play for without being hit for copyright on certain platforms. Like, all right, that keeps us safe, and now we can go back.
Well, that solo that was coming up there with Lenny White, he left as they were just breaking out and getting popular. They had some top 40 hits, and he went to Saturday Night Live and led the band there. He had a solo career, and he's the guy that you always hear, the opening of Saturday Night Live, the tenor sax.
Also, sorry to break in, but I want to thank DG8 really quickly. And he says, David, Trump is brave when it comes to risking the lives of our sons and daughters. That's very true. Thank you, DG8. Right. And I'm Marty. That is a very generous tip. So thank you. And he says, I will match all donations from now through the end of tomorrow's show.
Whoa, thank you.
That is very generous.
Thank you very much,
Marty.
Appreciate that. Okay, so folks, you heard that. He's going to match donations today and tomorrow. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you, Marty. You've been a tremendous supporter of this show. Everybody needs to thank Marty because he's one of the key reasons that we're able to keep going here. So it is the most powerful energy crisis in human history that is looming. And again, for those of us who were around in the 1970s, that is something that really ought to send a chill down your spine, especially when you look at all of the evil that came along with that. And I'm not just talking about the price of oil ratcheting up and staying there. I'm not just talking about inflation and the stagflation that happened, but I'm talking about things like entire government agencies and entire agendas are piggybacked on it. They always use a crisis to extend the scope of government, and that's what they're doing right now. So as of today, this morning, oil was just over $100. Gold has been consolidating, and a lot of people have been using that for the Turkish bank. Sold a lot of gold because they need the liquidity. And you got a lot of other people who need the liquidity. A lot of sovereign nations now are needing liquidity. That's how bad things are. But it's a good time, if you can afford it, it's a good time to buy gold. Stock up while the price is down because, as we were saying last week with Tony, none of the fundamentals that drove gold up have changed. That's why when everybody went crazy about all of Trump, talking about the Bitcoin strategic reserve and stuff like that, and it drove the price of gold down temporarily, I said, well, nothing has changed in terms of the fundamentals that were driving gold up in the first place. And it's only going to continue, and it certainly did. All of the fundamental things, all the debt, as well as all the other economic issues that are happening across the Western world, none of that is any better. As a matter of fact, it's all significantly worse. And so the perception of markets is always extreme and volatile. They always perceive the situation to be much better or much worse than it is in reality. And eventually reality will average out. But those swings that are going back and forth, that's why doing dollar cost averaging on your gold, saving it a little bit each month with Wolfpack, that's a great way to do it because it helps to minimize your exposure to these crazy swings from the marketplace that are reactions to things that Trump says and then takes it back. I mean, look at how many times this last week he manipulated the markets going up and going down, did it over and over again. And people were timing that, people that knew what was happening, some insider information. And there won't be any investigation of that, just like there's not going to be any investigation of the Epstein stuff as well. So Brent was on track for a record monthly gain, surged more than 3%. To open at 116. So what needs to happen before the oil starts flowing through the Strait of Hormuz again? Well, as Marty said, you got to put Trump in a straitjacket, maybe, and haul him off to an insane asylum. But the cost of marine insurance is one issue. Of course, more than 50% from pre-war levels, oil is, and gas prices in the U.S. have spiked. But things are even worse in places like Australia. There was a video that's up on social media. I didn't put it in the deck here. But it was a trucker in Australia, and he said, I keep driving. I can't find any stations anywhere. I mean, it's really getting bad when diesel truck drivers start to get range anxiety, like they're driving an EV or something. But he said, all the stations are out of gas. And so he ended his video. He pulled into a station where there's a bunch of trucks that were parked. And they're all just sitting there. They can't go anywhere until that station gets some gas. But they're just going to park at that station and wait for the gas to arrive rather than running out of gas on the way. That is the insanity that is happening. It's happening in a lot of countries. That doesn't help anybody. That doesn't help the U.S. Doesn't help anyone that is there. So again, just like war and the broken window fallacy, they always like to think that they're going to get some advantage out of this, but especially when it comes to economic advantage, there is none to be had. Well, let's take a look at what is happening with the protest, or happened, I should say, over the weekend. Trump does anything he wants and more, is a headline from the New York Times, and of course, that was what the protests were about. They were protests of the usurper king, because there is no authority for him to be doing any of that stuff, and he fully well knows it. And he boasts about it. That's how bad things are. So he's grabbing, as they point out, I thought this was funny. Trump used to brag about grabbing women by the crotch. Now he is grabbing the world by its axis. It's New York Times. He still believes that he has a right to swoop in with a transgressive attack to whoever he wishes. He has simply expanded his targets. His approach in the second term can best be described as manhandling, abetted by his cabinet of lackeys and congressional Republican bootlickers. Mike Johnson pathetically conjured an America First award for Trump out of thin air. The House Speaker called the beautiful golden statue of an eagle appropriate to the new golden era in America. Isn't that amazing? I mean, that just disgusts me. There's no limit. I've never seen such a spineless, bootlicker, sycophant, whatever you want to call him, person as Mike Johnson. Trump thinks more than ever that he can have his way with whatever he wants and whatever way that he wants, whether it's a country, a skyline, whether it's the White House building. He salivates at the thought of pillaging Greenland and assailing Cuba. Yeah, he when he talks about Cuba, he really does come across as Dr. Evil, doesn't he?
Peter?
When you say Cuba is next.
Cuba. I do believe I'll be having the honor of taking Cuba. That'd be good. That's a big honor.
Taking Cuba.
Taking Cuba in some form, yeah. Taking Cuba. I mean, whether I free it, take it, I think I could do anything I want with it. You want to know the truth? They're a very weakened nation right now.
Yeah, well, part of that is we now have another kind of a nascent Cuban Missile Crisis type of thing from when I was a kid. I mean, it just keep coming back. That was about ships that were carrying nuclear missiles to Cuba, close to Florida. Now, looks like we have a developing confrontation because of the oil embargo that America wants to serve on Cuba. So now you got Russians who are bringing not nuclear weapons, but oil to Cuba as they're having blackouts. And it looks like they're going to have some kind of a confrontation there over that. This is how stupid things have gotten under Trump. And so when we look at the No Kings rallies, they were massive, not only in this country, but around the world, people protesting Trump. That's a good thing. However, what's not a good thing is the fact that they have, because of what Trump has done, he is empowering the left, and I mean the radical left that is out there. The approach that will be taken by the MAGA people and by Fox News is say, well, this is just a lot of, there's $3 billion worth of money behind these organizations. There's about 500 of them or whatever. And so, there's a lot of money there. It's all AstroTurf and all the rest of the stuff. No, there's legitimate complaints. And these legitimate complaints are being used by the hardcore. And I mean, these people are self-identifying Marxists and socialists. And it's being used by them as a lever to get people to sympathize with them. That's what's really dangerous about this. And I think Trump knows this as well. I think that's part of the plan. I think that's why he was put in. So nationwide, the No Kings protests against Trump descended into chaos on Saturday, writes the Daily Mail, as violent demonstrators pelted cops with concrete blocks and stormed federal buildings, resulting in multiple arrests. So for the third time, millions gathered coast to coast for coordinated demonstrations against the president. And of course, the bad news is that Trump is hurting these people, not Hurting, but he is Herding. He's herding them into corralling them into not only escalating the divide and the Civil War, but also pushing these people to the other side.
Sorry to interrupt,
corruption.
but I just have to thank Junk Silver. It was a very, very generous donation. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
He just says G, just the letter G. I don't know if that, if you've got a message, Junk Silver, for you, feel free to type it in chat and I'll see if I can find it. But thank you so much. That is incredibly generous.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't see it, but thank you for the tip. I appreciate that. So protesters took their anger right to Trump's doorstep at Mar-a-Lago. But again, there's a lot of them, and they were, as I say, mostly peaceful. But this is what will happen whenever you go to a demonstration. There'll always be some violent elements, and the opposition will always focus on that. As a matter of fact, we had a guy who used to work for us when we had video stores, and he put up a thing. He went to the No Kings rally in Durham. This is what it looked like. And they were everywhere. I think it was 3,300 protests over all 50 states. And so you'll have Daily Mail and Fox News will focus on the violence. Rocks, bottles, and cement blocks hurled at police in L.A. 2 officers needed medical attention. 2 individuals were arrested for allegedly assaulting federal law enforcement. So we can talk about that, but not talk about why people are so upset with Trump. Of course, the White House just dismisses it as, this is just Trump derangement syndrome. Well, they are delusional, and that includes the White House as well. If they don't understand what is happening here, why people are angry about this. And of course, the MAGA people are delusional. They think that Trump can do no wrong. And it's actually Trump that is deranged. It has lost his mind. And the things that he's doing are incredibly harmful for people. When we look at different countries as well, as I said, here in the United States, one person said they're trampling on the Constitution, whether it's gas or tariffs or the cost of living or whatever. I mean, we're just not paying attention. And notice how this person who is 72 years old in Mississippi focused on everything that person mentioned was economic. That's why James Carville said it's the economy, stupid. And it is with these people. I mean, you could talk about Epstein, you could talk about the wars, you could talk about Trump's corruption, open corruption that is happening there. But instead what they do is they focus on their own personal economics, and that is the key issue there. 500 groups with $3 billion in revenue are behind the No Kings protests, and communists call for a revolution. This is what Fox News wants to talk about. But you know what Fox News will not talk about? They'll not talk about the fact that they and Trump get billions of dollars from Big Pharma, the military-industrial complex, Big Ag, APAC, the AI and crypto billionaires. I won't talk about any of that stuff, right? Oh, no, these protests against it are all AstroTurf. Well, they're AstroTurf as well. The amazing thing to me was when we look at CPAC, while the No Kings things were going, and I don't know, I think CPAC was on Saturday, the same day. Well, you got everybody around the world pushing back against kings that just do whatever they wish. What does CPAC do? Where are the conservatives on all this? They bring in the son of the Shah, which was Persian for king. The guy that was put in by the CIA and the Mossad, who trained his own secret police, the Savak, some of the worst secret police ever. I mean, we're talking about the Nazis or about Stalin's secret police. Savak is right there. And they bring the guy in, the son of this guy, and he's cheered at CPAC. He has absolutely no chance of getting anything in Iraq except assassinated if he went back. He is so roundly hated, and justly so. And so why would they be cheering a king at CPAC? Of course, they're cheering Trump, and they cheer the guy who was the one responsible for the Ayatollahs, quite frankly. You look at American foreign policy, what the CIA, what Mossad did, the Ayatollahs were blowback against this guy's father, and yet he's the one that they're cheering at CPAC. Like, how blind can you be? And what are they trying to conserve? Are they trying to conserve a republic, a constitution? No. They're trying to conserve a king. So the communist groups were using the day to call for a revolution. And Trump has given them all the ammunition they could use. We may be running out of anti-ballistic missiles and cruise missiles, but the communists are getting all their ammunition replenished by Donald Trump. No kings, no war, and a party for socialism and liberation was the flyer that was put out by these people. Again, there are legitimate grievances that are here, and he has handed this stuff to them on a silver platter to let them own it. Why? Because the Republicans are kowtowing to this man. They won't stand for any principles. They should be standing in opposition, because if they don't, then the people are going to turn to the radical left for opposition to Trump.
There's also the fact that the Soros DAs are all still basically in place. If the right wing stages a protest, there will be provocateurs and there will be some kind of false flag. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
The left wing can literally burn down your city and nothing will happen. They'll be released the next day. But if you show up with justified grievances to protest, you can be sure they will nail you. They will destroy your life. We've seen that over and over again.
That's right. That's right. People everywhere become increasingly hostile to the Trump agenda, more sympathetic to revolution, said the communists. Our revolutionary message in front of them and turn a day of protest into long-term gains for the people's movements. And what they're talking about is the radical left, socialists and communists.
Yeah, all the dysgenic freaks.
Yeah. Why socialists should mobilize to the No Kings protest this weekend. They are having a field day. Trump is the best thing that ever happened to the communist left. He really is. It's the time to go out and join the people and get our revolutionary message in front of them and turn a day of protest into long-term gains. Post circulating from activists associated with the Denver chapter of the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. Imagery referencing the Red Army Choir. Soviet symbolism. I mean, not the Russian Republic, but Soviet symbolism. And pictures of Joe Stalin and Mao Zedong. How about that? And so, again, I said Trump is driving America into the arms of the communists. It's just disgusting to watch this. Describing the United States as a form of fascism, it is now, and advocating organizing strategies rooted in Mao Zedong's doctrine of a people's war, which called for revolutionary movements to embed themselves inside broader political struggles. Well, that was really what Antonio Gramsci did with his march through the institutions. And they have basically marched through the institutions. They have taken them over. That is really what has happened so far. So when we look at what is happening, here's London, the protests in London, 500,000 people in London protesting what Trump is doing, massive crowds there. So people shouting, "This is not our war." And again, handing a victory to Keir Starmer. Do you want to hand a victory to people like Keir Starmer and Gavin Newsom? That's it's helping them politically. Saying this is not our war. We're not going to help you with this. And so in the same UK where journalist Steve Sweeney was just struck by an Israeli missile while reporting. And so a lot of anger about that. And even protests in Israel. I don't know if the protests in Israel were about Trump or if they were about Bibi. So when you look at what happened in Israel, it got violent there because the police attacked the protesters. As a matter of fact, last week there was a picture of some ultra-Orthodox Jews that are protesting, and a bus ran them over at speed. I mean, that's just amazing. Well, that's the fight that's going on in Israel. They're not happy about the war there. And a lot of protests in Tel Aviv. You can see a lot of people out on the street as well. So people protesting in the UK against taxes, against war, against genocide, against fascism. They're not protesting against the immigrants for some reason. But there were protests in Rome, Paris, Madrid, Berlin, Amsterdam, Sydney. Millions of Americans, anywhere from, the estimates are anywhere from 8 to 9 million people. And 3,300 protests across all 50 states. And then protests in Italy, France, Spain, Germany, the Netherlands, Australia. All of them pretty much protesting the war that Trump has gotten us into. Then you have the people on the left, like Tim Walz, and with all the corruption of the Somalis. And again, the Trump administration knew about the Somali corruption back in 2018. They chose to not do anything about it then. They chose to put the ICE agents out and start harassing and beating people on the streets for confrontation without doing anything about the Somali stuff until, what's the guy's name? Nick, the reporter who showed it all. Nick Shirley. Till Nick Shirley exposed it, then that kind of forced their hand. So then they started talking about the Somalian stuff. But again, as I said many times, What was required was an army of accountants and auditors and investigators. They didn't need a bunch of armed thugs that have been given absolute immunity to do whatever they want on the streets. That just escalated the situation, and it made the Somalians and other people look like victims, even if they were breaking the law. And so Tim Walz vows, "We will never leave the side of our Somali Minnesotans." Because, they got a lot of money in their pockets. It's amazing to me how these guys, again, when we look at TSA and all the nonsense about this, how are they able to take millions of dollars in cash out of those airports on a regular basis? And many, many, many times much more money than ever goes out in cash at the big cities like Chicago or New York or LA. How does it work that way? Because I remember one of the first cases that I recall about civil asset forfeiture was about a poor landscaper who did all of his business in cash. He had $9,000 worth of cash, and he walks up and he buys a ticket, pays cash for it. They call security. This is before even TSA. This is back in the early 90s, late 80s. So they called security, and they find this guy's got $9,000 worth of cash. They steal it under civil asset forfeiture. He said, I always do this. He said, I fly down and I buy a truck and all the landscaping stuff I do it, and I drive it back. It's like, whatever you think of his business model. I mean, that sounds kind of crazy, but that's what he did on a regular basis. There was no criminal activity, and yet they confiscated all that money. So I'm looking at the stuff that's happening with Somalians. It's like, how can they send millions, tens of millions of dollars to this criminal Marxist gang in Somalia and get away with that? And let the TSA lets them do that when they come down so hard on this guy here in America. And so it's Tim Walz. I guess they must be getting a kickback. I guess that's how that works. We're going to take a quick break, folks, and we'll be right back.
Making sense common again. You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Elvis.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles.
And the sweet sounds of Motown. Find them on the Oldies channel at apsradio.com.
Welcome back, folks. And we do have some comments and tips. And want to say thank you to Max Alva. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
It says, hope you guys check out my unofficial David Knight search site. And it's davidknightsearch.com.
I have to check that out. I wonder where that search is. Because I pretty much disappeared from the internet. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Max Alvin. Of course, I'm Marty. Thank you very much. He is matching donations to the end of the show tomorrow.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, we're at about 70, just over 70%. And I think 71%. We've got the gas gauge at 3/4, but we're down quite a bit this month. And so I appreciate that, Marty. Thank you very much for seeing the need and stepping up. I appreciate that. You always do. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Marty. And of course, thank you again to Junk Silver. That was incredibly generous as well.
Thank you.
And Anna Strong Culper, thank you very much. She says, Zechariah 12:3 and 14:2 says, every nation will come against Jerusalem. I see it coming to be.
Yeah. And it is vice versa. It seems like they're picking a fight with everybody as well. So,
yeah. Of course, that could also have been relating to them back in the day, because that happened that's happened several times throughout history.
Yeah.
Quite a few times people showed up and been like, I don't know. I'm not feeling what Israel's up to. Time to put them into captivity.
And that's the thing, I just want to, that's what's really important to me is I want to point people to Christ. And, it is, when we look at what is happening with Israel, understand that it's not what we have in terms of modern Judaism is nothing at all like Moses. It isn't just that they rejected Christ. They have rejected all of both the Old and the New Testament. And when you look at the Old Testament, it was covenantal, it was sacrificial, it was messianic, it was pointing to Christ. And so much of what was done that was actually done. When we talk to Ben Shapiro, when he's asked by Joe Rogan, said he believed that Moses parted the Red Sea. No, I don't believe that. But you believe that he gave you the land, right? Oh, yeah, he gave us the land. And so that was a picture of what was happening. I believe that it really happened. And I believe that it really happened and was a picture of the greater reality of what Christ would do. So all these people who are looking for the third temple and all the rest of this stuff, did they not realize that Christ said, destroy this temple and I will rebuild it in 3 days, right? They didn't realize he's talking about himself and about his work. It's not, his kingdom is not of this earth. And we don't want to focus on that type of thing any more than we want to focus on any religious leader, any institution. The focus needs to be on Christ and what he has provided for people. That is the most important thing. And we need to never lose sight of that. So.
Yeah. And DGA, thank you. He says, David, did you ever think Trump is actually a Democratic operative? David, the Trump cult is obtuse and blind to how bad things are going. They have no idea how big of a bloodbath November will be.
Yeah, I constantly say that he's a New York City Democrat. I believe that. He's a friend of the Clintons, and he lived in New York all the time, and he still loves these interviews with the New York Times, even though they always use the opportunity to eviscerate him and twist the knife. He keeps coming back because he wants the respect of the New York Times and all the rest of stuff. He is a New York City Democrat and everything that does. And we'll talk about that with this next article here.
Yes. And the real Jason Barker. Thank you very much, Jason.
Thank you, Jason.
And he says, thanks, I'm Marty. And of course, you can find Jason on Knights of the Storm. They're on Rumble, and you can go to knightsofthestorm.com to find the schedule for all these shows.
Yeah,
their show, our show, Goldsmith show, many shows. You can find the schedule there and perhaps find some new shows that you would enjoy watching with useful and worthwhile information.
That's right. Well, let's take a look at what Trump, the Democrat, is doing. This is from Gun Owners of America, and they have called him out on his bump stock betrayals and all the rest of the stuff, gun control by executive order. Why is the Trump Department of Justice still enforcing the Biden pistol brace rule, they ask? Well, it's not simply the Biden pistol brace rule. They need to understand that this really came from Trump as well. He set the precedent with the bump stock, and then he followed his own precedent, and so did Biden with a pistol brace. The current Department of Justice is choosing to continue enforcing an unconstitutional legal theory. That's because he is precedent Trump. He sets precedents. According to a recent statement in Gun Owners of America, the Department of Justice claims that ATF continues to enforce the National Firearm Act and the GCA's regulation of short-barreled rifles against some brace-equipped pistols. The rule has been universally vacated, and yet they continue with this. This is what they're doing with fluoride. We had a big victory with fluoride. Derek Brose and people at the Free Thought Project and many others had won a big victory to stop the putting of fluoride in the drinking water. And the Trump administration comes along and fights that, appeals that. For those who are unfamiliar, in 2022, the Biden administration issued an executive order. Well, I think the history is a little bit different than what it says here in the article here. What really happened was back in December of 2020, after Trump had pushed through the bump stock rule, doing gun control by executive order, and I've played that over and over again. He sits there at the table with John Cornyn, who is now running again for Senate. He was all for gun control, just like, what's her name? She's now dead. The Dianne Feinstein. So he's got Dianne Feinstein on one side and John Cornyn on the other, both of them for gun control. He goes, well, you guys need to do your stuff. But he goes, fortunately, there's a lot of things that I can do just with my pen, type of thing. And I can do it by executive order. He did do that. And it was for the bump stock, which again goes back to that highly questionable event in Vegas. Yes, people really died. But that's about the only thing about it that was real. So they used that. That's a big red flag right there. And he used that to establish the precedent of doing gun control by executive order, which is worse than the Supreme Court or the Congress violating the Second Amendment, because it just takes one guy to do it. And so what he did in December of 2020, he gave guidance to reclassify braced pistols as short-barreled rifles. That would subject them to a $200 tax and a lot of other regulations. He did that on December the 18th. So they don't want to talk about that here, unfortunately. They only want to talk about what Biden did. Let's talk about what Trump did for a change, okay? December the 18th, 2020, while he is grifting and setting up his own people for January the 6th, he stabs him in the back with a gun control by executive order yet again for the second time. So he puts this rule out there saying that braced pistols are going to be treated like short-barreled rifles. He does that on December the 18th. And then he finally got pushback. Gun Owners of America pushed back against his bump stock nonsense. But the National Rifle Association didn't want to have that fight with him. They didn't care about bump stocks, and they didn't want to have a fight with Trump. So they saw that as something they could throw away, but it was a very important precedent. Gun Owners of America realized that. And so they pushed back on it. But when he did it with the pistol brace, the NRA and Gun Owners of America and many others pushed back against that. So that only lasted for 5 days. He removed that on December the 23rd. Then when Biden gets sworn in, one of the first things he does is bring that back, because Trump already did it. Trump set the precedent for executive order gun control, and he set the precedent for doing the pistol brace. So the Department of Justice under Biden used this rule to effectively outlaw firearms equipped with stabilizing braces. Gun Owners of America is writing this article. They point out other pro-gun groups challenge this pistol brace rule in multiple courts across the country, culminating with a total elimination of this rule in court. And yet, the current Justice Department is looking to pick up right where the Biden Department of Justice left off. Why would this surprise anybody? I mean, we've had a couple of scandals with both Pam Bondi as well as Judge Janine talking about how I made the streets safer because I got guns off the streets, right? Both of them have said that. Both of them are gun controllers. Bondi as well as Judge Janine Perrine, or whatever her name is, the Fox commentator. So Trump said, I will eliminate Biden's ATF's ridiculous pistol brace rule. He said that when he was running for office. See, this is another one of his campaign betrayals. You know, when I see people out there say, I voted for this, when Trump does the wrong thing, when Trump takes us to war, whatever. Well, you didn't vote for that, because Trump was, if you voted for Trump, you were voting for peace, because that's what he was promising. If you voted for Trump, you're voting to get rid of any pistol brace rules, because that's what he promised. But that's not what he did. As a matter of fact, nobody voted for war, really, that voted for Trump. So no, you didn't vote for that. You're too stupid to understand what you voted for even. It's like the people at CPAC who are applauding his impeachment. I certainly would applaud that, but they didn't even know what they were applauding. They didn't know who they were voting for either. You could have seen all of this stuff in his first term. He had already betrayed the Second Amendment. Throughout 2020, he betrayed every aspect of the Bill of Rights. President Biden said Trump imposed the so-called pistol brace rule. All those Biden disasters get ripped up and torn out my first week. From the guy who was the one who proposed it, December the 18th, 2020, and then removed it December 23rd. And now they are appealing and trying to keep it in there. So Gun Owners of America says the disconnect between Trump's campaign promises and the Department of Justice's recent threat to owners of firearms with pistol braces justifiably has led to a great deal of confusion. You're the only people who are confused about what this guy's about because you want him to be something that he's not. You're projecting your values onto him. He doesn't value the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. That's a projection that you're putting on him. So again, it's the only people who are confused about this are the people who are engaged in doublethink. To gun owners and firearm industry, we urge caution. The ATF and the Department of Justice apparently intend to continue targeting at least some braced pistols. The Trump administration, to them, we request, says Gun Owners of America, a swift reaffirmation of the president's intention to end the pistol brace ban. And so even as the Department of Justice fights us in court, we continue to seek a permanent injunction against the ATF's enforcement of its legal theories regarding regulating braced pistols as short-barreled rifles. Well, again, it is the Bondi Department of Justice, and she wants to keep pistol braces as well as the Epstein docs. And then, as Lance has said before, when we talked about all this 3D printer stuff that's happening, a kid just 3D printed a $97 man-pad rocket launcher. Now, we're talking about the man-pad. This is a shoulder-fired RPG, essentially, rocket launcher. And he did it with a 3D printer and $97 worth of materials. You see, when we were talking about this, he says they're not worried about ghost guns. They're worried about ghost rocket launchers. When we have the Concord and Lexington event of the 21st century, they'll be coming for the 3D printers that you use to make things that are far more powerful than cannons. That's the reality of this, the ghost rocket launchers that are there. This is why they're moving heaven and earth to try to shut down 3D printers with regulations saying you can't print anything unless you have the software in there to go back and scope out whatever anybody is printing and make sure it doesn't interfere with anything that's on our prohibited list. The system uses an onboard flight computer, inertial measurement hardware, and a sensor stack that includes GPS, compass, and barometric modules to determine orientation and transmit telemetry. He says, the developer in a video says, modern tools, additive manufacturing, consumer electronics, and rapid prototyping have shattered the old barriers that were once confined advanced hardware to well-funded laboratories. So again, $97 to build a 3D printed shoulder-fired rocket launcher. He has a $5 sensor and uses piano wire as part of this.
I really hope this guy takes it to a range and just sends some range officer apoplectic. Just, you can't bring it.
Yeah, it's to point out it's making warfare cheaper, faster, more decentralized, more accessible to civilians. This technology has already appeared on modern battlefields. Just take a look at what happened in Ukraine. And take a look at what happened with the low-cost Iranian drones. Why did the Trump administration or anybody in the Pentagon not pay attention to that? Not only is this stuff cheap and can be manufactured much more rapidly than their complex, expensive, esoteric weapon systems, but Iran, just from the standpoint that Iran was supplying drones to Russia to use in Ukraine. I mean, that was widely reported. We talked about it here. If they've got so many drones that they're manufacturing that they can give them to Russia, how many do you think they've got? Well, people in the Pentagon aren't really thinking about that. Anyway, the Army currently pays $400,000 for a similar system to this that cost this guy $97. That's your asymmetric economic warfare. And their version probably has some very rare materials that Trump has shut down before he got a second source for it. Here's another betrayal here. Myocarditis affects only COVID-vaccinated use. This is what I talked about at the beginning of the show. This is something that YouTube has worked very hard to remove any interviews and discussions of this particular study because they are complicit in killing people for money. YouTube, Big Pharma, Big Silicon, whatever you want to call these people. And so, again, this is yet another Trump betrayal, and a betrayal, quite frankly, by RFK Jr. and Maha. Why are they not stopping this bioweapon? They're playing around with other stuff. Analysis of the first 15 months of the COVID pandemic in Germany, a population of 84 million, found that 0 healthy children died of the disease. Remember that? It was all about saving grandma and grandpa, right? They told us at the very beginning of this that it's not affecting children, which was one of the tells, quite frankly. Like I said, when you look at virology, when you look at the lies about this pandemic, if you're going to make up a story, if you're going to do a science fiction plot, one of the key things that you've got to do is keep your rules consistent, right? That's the difference between a good piece of science fiction and a bad one. In a good piece of science fiction, they imagine this alternate universe, and it might be something like Dune, where they've got some spice that lets them, navigate at speed of light or something without hitting anything. Whatever it is, you've got to have whatever rules you make up in your fantasy universe. They have to be consistent, or you wind up with nothing at all. And that's the problem with this pandemic. They want to tell us that it doesn't affect the children, but it was no time at all before they were requiring the children to get it, to get something that had not been tested, which, regardless of whether or not this thing worked for adults, it was unnecessary for children, right? And yet it had not been tested for efficacy or for safety, except I think it had been tested for safety. I think they knew exactly what they were doing. That's my opinion. I don't have the proof of that, but we do have the proof of all the harm that it has done. And that developed right away. And they continued to double down and triple down on it. We knew right from the very beginning, as soon as this poison from Trump rolled out, we could see it in the VAERS database reflected. And yet they continued to increase the mandates surrounding it. And so now what we see from these large studies that are coming from other countries, we are seeing that there's not any children. From the study in Germany, no children died from COVID. It's much easier to go to elderly people. The older you get, the more health issues you've got, and you can attribute a death or sickness to a lot of different causes. And so they can relabel things that are happening to people who are elderly, and they can relabel that as COVID. For children, it wasn't quite as easy. And yet what we have found is that there were no children who died from COVID. No unvaccinated children died from myocarditis. Myocarditis for children is a disease of the Trump bioweapon. That's the bottom line, folks. Now, how many children has this pedophile killed? And again, I look at this, and pedophilia is abhorrent. What Epstein was doing was abhorrent. It was satanic. Child trafficking and raping and, all the rest of the stuff. But what about the murder of children that Trump did, and did it openly? And there has been no consequences for this, not in this life. There will be. Even to see people like Candace Owen start to engage him on that issue and immediately back down when he starts boasting about the vaccine. And it's not just these issues. It's Section 702 of the FISA Act. He was saying as a candidate, we need to get rid of this. And now he has become Mr. Surveillance State. He's all about extending FISA. He's all about extending AI as a surveillance tool and weapon. Everything the man has done is a lie and a betrayal. Thank you for joining us. Have a good day.
But real quickly, before we do go out, I want to say thank you to B. Turner, 170. That's very generous.
Thank you.
It says, DK, thanks for never selling out like Alex and for not crashing out like Dan Bongino. Managed to avoid
nobody.
those.
Yeah, nobody offered me a position in the Trump administration. I wasn't even tempted. I wouldn't have been tempted if they had.
I can think of nothing that would have made you more miserable.
Yeah, just being in Washington is bad enough. I can't imagine being in the Trump White House with all the sycophants running around there, licking his boots all the time.
And we have Star Barkley. Thank you very much, Star Barkley. He says, I rely on the David Knight Show more than all the rest. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
Yes.
Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you, Marty. Thank you for matching contributions. Have a good day, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't get to today. We'll get to that tomorrow. The Common Man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.